Hello, beautiful people, and welcome, to a banner review for the second half of 3.6. So, we've got Baizhu, obviously, and then the 4 stars we have Kaveh, which we already knew about, and then we have Candace and Fischl. This banner is unironically kind of not that bad. Denver teams in general, a lot of them can synergize well with Fischl. The teams where Baizhu will be, like, particularly good aren't necessarily the ones that synergize well with Fischl, although they definitely can be. Like, I've talked in his pre-release about, like, where he can be good. I've talked about how I don't really like him as a driver because his normal attack AoE seems to be just too small for it to be viable in AoE, basically. But when you use him just, like, not as a driver, as a support, if you use him in aggravate teams, you get to take advantage of his passive, which is nice, and like, it's just a nice little thing. And in those aggravate teams, Fischl is good, and Fischl's cons can be a little bit useful, so that's nice. The rest is a little, I don't really know how to qualify it, other than interesting, I guess. Kanaka is bad, but she does have, like, a niche in Nilo teams where she can actually be pretty good there, because she does provide pretty decent AoE Hydra application, especially if you have her at high constellation. It's kind of just meh. She's not a character that, like, generally you'd be happy to see on a banner. I am somewhat happy to see her here, because I kind of do want to get Kaveh, and she's one of the characters that I don't have at C6, so I'm not unhappy with it, but it definitely isn't, like, anything that is generally going to be good. And then Kaveh, the Kaveh pre-release will be posted by the time this video is live. Personally, I'm really happy with, because I am going to, like, I already have my build all set out, like, all ready for him. It is not a good build, and I don't care. I'm going to be playing him on Bloodstain just because I think his charge attack animation is funny. So if I can charge attack for longer, then it'll be funnier. It's not a good idea. It's not going to be good. It's not going to fucking work. I don't care. It'll be funny. And that's all I care about. Other than that, he's fine. Let's do like we did last time and go a little bit further into those characters' constellations. Let's start with Kandace. Her C1 is actually, like, really useful. There is actually a pretty reasonable difference between her at C0 and her at C1. I'm talking in the context of Nilo teams, right? Because outside of the context of Nilo teams, she's shit no matter her constellation level. Apart from maybe at C6, which we'll talk about when we get there. Her C2 doesn't really matter. Wow, she gets more health. Who cares? It's not like she has enough health for it to, like, it's not like her HP scaling is good anyways, so who really cares? Burst levels doesn't really matter because her scalings are kind of shit anyways. Same for the skill levels. This makes it so that when you get your parry, it's the same cooldown as your baseline thing, which I guess can be fine, but meh. Like, her only real constellations are her C1 and her C6. Her C1 increases duration from 9 to 12 seconds, which is a pretty big deal. Her C6 significantly increases her AoE Hydra application. It gives her, I guess they just call it an attack, but it's like a circle that deals Hydra damage around you up to once every 2.3 seconds. You're gonna get like 5-ish per burst, which is 5 additional blooms, which is a lot of damage in the Nilo teams. Like, if you just look at constellation strength exclusively, this is an incredibly strong constellation. If this constellation was on a character that wasn't dog shit, then people would be talking about it like they talk about Singso C6 and Sailing C4. But because Kandace starts from such a little spot, it's not enough to make her, like, actually good outside of Nilo teams, but it is enough to make her, like, kinda fine-ish in some teams that might care about AoE Hydra application, like Virgin. And I guess you can use her as, like, an on-fielder for Shangling or stuff like that, but it's not ideal. And then we have Fischl. Fischl's C1 is a joke. Fischl's C2 is, you know, I actually realized kind of recently that Fischl's C2 was a bit better than I gave it credit for. Not because of the additional damage, but because of the AoE increase. I actually, like, noticed the difference when I play on my free-to-play and I don't have it, and I feel like my Oz like initial cast never hits the enemy, or only hits one enemy when on my main account it would hit 2 or 3. It's not that huge of a deal, but it is a nice little quality of life upgrade. C3 is fine, but especially if you play her in aggravate teams, motion value is useful, but because she also has a decent portion of her damage coming through aggravate, then it's not as relevant as you might expect just from thinking about how most of her damage comes from her skill, right? C4, that one is kind of meh. Like the healing can be nice, I guess. It's a little bit of quality of life, and it also deals a little bit of damage, which is also kind of nice. But like this one, I don't notice when I don't have it. C5 is completely garbage, and C6 is pretty nice. I think it's a little bit overrated. I think many people think that without C6, Fischl's just like bad. She's not. She's very good even without C6. Her C6 does help her quite a bit in some teams, but there's also some teams where it doesn't do that much. So in aggravate teams, it is helpful because it increases her damage, but for most setups, it won't actually change whether or not you're able to Electro Swirl. And outside of those setups, like it's a somewhat marginal damage increase. The extended duration often matters more than the coordinated attack part of it, because the coordinated attack shares internal cooldown with the skill itself, which means that while you will get more electro application, it's not going to be like 2 in a row in a short period of time. It's just going to make it faster, like overall, which is nice, but like I said, it's a somewhat marginal thing a lot of the time. It can help quite a bit in some teams, like in solid teams with Sucrose, where you're relying on the enemy being affected with Electro, so that you can Electro Swirl and, you know, get your Hyper Blooms with Sucrose. In those teams, the C6 helps quite a bit, but it's far from a necessary constellation, right? It's not one of those characters where you're not gonna want to play them if you don't have high cons, right? Like there's a lot of characters that like gain a lot from constellations, and what they gain from constellation is enough to make it so that you might not want to play them if you don't have the cons for them, but you probably would want to play them if you did. So I guess an example of that is Tangling. If you don't have other options, you're probably going to play Tangling anyways, but if you do have other strong characters and you don't have C4 and Tangling, you're likely to see better results with your other options than with Tangling, because she gains quite a bit from her C4. That's not really the case with Fischl. If you're playing a team where Fischl is, or would be a good unit to slot in, she is going to be a good unit to slot in. She is going to be the unit you want to put. That kind of does it for the Constellation overview for these characters. I've actually been thinking, I do Ascendant videos for the 5 stars that get reruns. I've been considering doing them for some 4 stars. If that's the kind of stuff that you would be interested in, tell me in the comments, because I'm still like hesitating. I'm not sure. So let me know if that's the kind of content that you'd like to see. I will have released a Kaveh video by the time this comes out, but I should do a small Constellation overview for him as well. C1, within 3 seconds after using Artistic Ingenuity, is that his burst or his skill? That's his skill. His gender resistance and incoming healing bonus will be increased by 50 and 25% respectively. Basically, after you've used your E, you become more resistant to self-bloom damage. That's the part that really matters. And because his E detonates cores, you can kind of think of his C1 as a thing that makes him tankier when you're on-fielding him in bloom teams. But like I talked about in the pre-release, him in bloom teams is like questionable. C2, normal attack speed increased by 15% during Painted Dome. It's fine, I guess. It doesn't really do much. C3, increase the level of Painted Dome. Right, this is burst. I don't think levels do very much. I guess it gives a little bit of damage bonus to your cores, but it's, as far as I understand, it is an additive damage bonus, so this is like really not a big deal. Going to 55 from 46, right, that's like less than 9%. If you're at like 1000 EM, it's the equivalent of like 30 EM-ish. It's not completely useless, but it's pretty minor. It's really not that huge of a deal because it's an additive scaling. Some part of me is still hoping that they're gonna change it before he comes out, or that I misunderstood and that it is a multiplicative scaling, because then he'd be a lot more interesting, but 4 dendro cores created from bloom reactions Kaveh triggers will deal 60% more damage when they burst. I'm still not sure if this triggers on the on cores that like he didn't get ownership for, but he detonates early with his skill. If it does, it's a nice little addition to that team, but that team is kind of shit to begin with, so it doesn't really matter that much. And if it's only for the reactions that he has ownership for, then it's just complete garbage. C5 skill level increase is just actually useless because it's only talent damage and it doesn't do a lot of damage. It's kind of like Ganyu skill level increase, right? Like it just doesn't do anything. It's just not useful. And then finally C6. Kaveh C6 is an interesting case. It's one of those constellations that you're gonna have to think about whether you actually want to activate it or not, because when he hits opponents during his burst, you get an additional dendro damage instance once every 3 seconds that detonates dendro cores. But because his like actually strictly bloom teams are, in my opinion, unlikely to be very good, if you like Kaveh and like the thing that you like is his animations or his character design or whatever, and the thing that you like is not like his playstyle design with the bloom gimmick, right? If that's the case for you, then activating this might actually make him worse, because it makes him work less well in hyperbloom teams, right? Because it makes the cores detonate early, which prevents you from hyperblooming them, which is likely going to be less damage if you're playing a hyperbloom team. If you play him in the teams that fit his gimmick, it is a massive buff. But those teams, in my opinion, are pretty unlikely to be any good. So if you're playing him, because like I know there's a lot of people going around calling him baby girl, right? There's a lot of simping for him. If you want to play him because you're simping for him, you're probably going to have better results if you play him in hyperbloom teams, and his C6 might actually make his teams worse. If it were me, if I'm not going to pull on his banner enough to get him, but if I did, I probably would activate this constellation, just because if I want to play a hyperbloom driver, I already have hyperbloom drivers. I don't need it to be him. So I'd rather have a character that does something different. I think the playstyle design is really interesting. It's also really poorly balanced and really shit, but it is interesting. And for me, that's enough that I would activate this. But keep in mind that that might not be the case for you. Anyways, I am going to record an Ask the Dev Ganyu tomorrow as of recording this. Hopefully it comes out before the banner. It might come out a little bit late though, because I am doing this a bit tight in time. The reason why I'm gonna record another one is basically because Nahida was not out last time. And while Burn Mel Ganyu isn't like great, it is an interesting thing and it is worth talking about. All in all though, like I have no idea why they would put Ganyu on a banner like this. Like Fischl, you don't play Fischl with Ganyu, you don't play Kondaka with Ganyu, you won't play Baizhu with Ganyu. Although, I guess you could play Kaveh with Ganyu. You could play Hyper Fridge Kaveh. Or just Fridge Kaveh. But yeah, I feel like the only reason why Ganyu's on banner is because they thought she was due for a rerun, and they just put her there after having already decided on this banner, like on the 4 stars for the banner. It's just weird. Kind of, I guess, the same way that Nilo feels weird with these. Like putting Nilo on a banner when none of the other characters are Hydro or Dendro just feels weird. Why would they do that? I don't know. Like I cannot understand for the life of me why they would not put Kondaka here and Lila on the other banner. Everything would have been so much nicer. Things would have been so much cleaner. I don't get it. Why? Why would you do this? Anyways, moving on to the weapons. Let's get this out of the way. The 5 stars suck. This is not a banner that anyone should wish for. Jadefalls Splendor is kind of bad. So if we actually look at the stats, mid base attack, HP substat, which already like that's a terrible combination. But yeah, when you have like catalysts that are designed for characters that don't care about attack, you want it to be low base attack. For 5-star weapons, low base attack is 542. So when a weapon has 608 or 674 or I guess 741 base attack, right? The other base attacks that 5-star weapons can have, it's just disappointing because you don't care about the attack, and some of the power level of this weapon is wasted into attack. It feels bad. It sucks. No one's happy with this. Anyways, for 3 seconds after using a burst or creating a shield, the equipment character gains the effect, which restores energy and gains damage percent. The damage percent is kind of a joke. Baizhu doesn't care about it that much because he just doesn't do that much damage. You'd rather have some more utility. And like, it's not a lot of damage percent either. And then the energy restoration part of it is the part of it that's good. On Baizhu, it actually does restore a decent amount of energy because he creates shields often, so he can basically keep this effect up for quite a while. I think he can get 5 or I think you get 6 procs, but you get somewhere between 20 and 30 energy, which is nice. But you know what's nicer? Getting energy on your whole team. Energy on him is nice, but Fab is so broken, and it gives ER. Usually, if you really care about the energy, you'd rather just run Fab. If you care about the healing, you'd rather run Prototype Amber, which gives a bit less energy, right? At R5, it's 6 energy times 3, so 18. So it's not quite as much, but it also heals the party when you activate it, so it heals quite a bit more overall. Like, all in all, the point isn't like this is never useful. The point is, when it is useful, it is a marginal upgrade over available 4 stars, which makes it a weapon, a 5-star weapon that you do not want to spend tens of thousands of primogems on. But also, the other 5-star weapon isn't really that good. So it's not even like, okay, well, this 5-star sucks, but the other one is really nice. So, like, if you really want to get that other one, then you might want to go for the banner anyways and risk getting unlucky and getting the Jadefalls Splendor. No, Amos Bow is like a fine weapon on Yoimiya. It's a fine-ish weapon on Child. It's an acceptable option on Technari, and it's a good weapon on Ganyu. But the thing is, it's not even the best weapon on Ganyu anymore. Like, it had a period of time where it was the best available option for Meld Ganyu. Freeze Ganyu generally had better options because a lot of your damage on Freeze Ganyu comes from your burst. So the Amos passive that significantly increases your charge attack damage didn't do that much. But they released Hunter's Path, which kind of just does more than Amos. The stats that it gives are more versatile, but they're also just better. On Meld Ganyu, Hunter's Path is generally just better. At like incredibly high whale level, Amos Bow can perform a little bit better, because basically the substat on Amos is worse, but the passive is better. And when you refine a weapon, it doesn't change the substat, it just increases the passive. And so refines on Amos increase Ganyu's or Melt Ganyu's damage more than refines on something like Hunter's Path. So if you're in like R5 Leviathan, Amos can still be a fine option on Ganyu, but like for basically everyone else, and even if that's the case for you, like it's just not worth it. And for everyone else, it's also just like, it's just not a good weapon. So the 5 stars are just not good on this banner. Moving on to the 4 stars, you should never go for a weapon banner just for the 4 stars. But if you want to go for Amos anyways because you think it looks good on Ganyu, and it's her signature weapon and you don't care about them at all that much, or you want to go for Jadefalls Splendor because you just really, really like Baizhu, or anything like that, right? Like, at the end of the day, I can talk about how a banner is just never really good to wish on, but that doesn't mean that everyone's gonna care, right? There are other reasons to go on a banner than just whatever's optimal. So it's still good to know some information about the rest. But I just want to make it very clear what I'm going to talk about does not take away from the fact that this banner is never actually worth going for if what you care about is meta and playing optimally. Okay, Wandering Evenstar is a pretty good catalyst. It's not, like, insane, but basically all of the weapons of that weapon series, you've got the Wandering Evenstar, you've got Makhaira Aquamarine, and you've got the Zyphos Moonlight, right? All 3 of those weapons just, like, are nice. They're all, like, pretty solid support weapons. Zyphos is by far the best one because it has a character that it basically just synergizes perfectly with. Zyphos gives ER and EM, and it also gives ER to the team, which makes it so that a character that you would usually run Fav on, because they needed the ER and it helped them generate energy for the team, but that people often just ran Iron Sting on anyways because his kit synergizes well with EM, right? Kazuha is gonna love a weapon like this. Basically, what makes Zyphos better than the other 2 options is that unlike the other two options, it has a character that works really well with it. It's still not really worth going on a weapon banner just for this, but it is an overall good weapon. Wandering Evenstar is not quite as good, but it is still pretty solid. It's a good weapon for Nahida. It's a good weapon for if you end up using Yaimiko in an aggravate team. It can be a good weapon for Lisa, I guess. It can be a fine option if you end up playing Unfair Klee as carries. But yeah, because it gives solid like offensive stats, but it also gives a small little, basically the equivalent of a noblesse buff to your other party members. Obviously, if you play it on a character like Klee or Yanfei, they're gonna get less EM than a character like Nahida would, right? Because you don't want to build them triple EM like ever, because the way that they scale with their reactions is not as, they don't scale as well with EM, so you don't want to build them full EM, right? So you're not going to get as big of a buff, but it's still a nice little useful buff. Like, all in all, it's a nice weapon to have. It can be best in slot 4-star on some teams, mostly on Nahida, right? If you go look at like the GC sim, when people run sims of teams with Nahida, right, to try to figure out like how well they perform, and they like min-max the rotation and stuff like that, and the builds, very often you'll see them using Wandering Evenstar. And then finally, you've got the Makhaira Aquamarine, which is also, I mean, it's the same thing, but it has like the downside of not having characters that work as well with it. Like, you can see when I alternate between the two tabs, it is literally the same text. This part is literally the exact same thing. It's just a different name and a different like lore description. But this part is not changing. It's the exact same text. And the stats, right, are also the exact same. They are the same weapon across two weapon types. What makes the Wandering Evenstar better is just that there's not as many Claymore characters that synergize well with an effect like this. Some of you might be thinking, okay, well, Sterge, Zajef, you like Thundering Fury. You think it's a good team. You know, full EM Razor. Wouldn't this be good on him? And yeah, it is, but I'd still just recommend going Fav instead if you have it. And even if you don't, honestly, this is not all that much better than Mailed Flower, I think, right? Mailed Flower is 110 EM plus 96, so 206 EM, which is 41 more than this. 24% attack, and this is 24% of your EM, so if you have 1,000 EM, it's 240 attack. It's a little different. Generally, this is a little bit more attack and a little bit less EM. This buffs the rest of your party, and this is EM on your character that cares about EM. All in all, there's not that much of a difference in team performance between the two, but it doesn't matter because you should be playing Fav anyways. Anyways, getting back to the weapon banner itself, right, I went on a bit of a tangent. Fav is obviously the best Claymore you can get on a weapon banner, so that's always nice. Lion's Roar is definitely not one of the best swords you can get. Generally, Fav will be the best one, with Sac also being like somewhat useful and nice to have, and Zyphos obviously also being somewhat useful and nice to have. Better than Fav sometimes at High Refine, mostly on Kazuha, but worse than Fav on basically every other character. Not every other character, but on a lot of other characters. Lion's Roar can still be good. It's good on Kutsing. It's good on Revnal Kea. But those aren't characters like Singto. Those aren't characters that basically everyone will end up playing if they care about meta. Those are characters that only people who want to play the teams that those characters are part in will play. Like if you're not someone who wants to play Kutsing Aggravate, you're probably not going to play Kutsing. Whereas when it comes to a character like Singto, he's like an integral part of so many different teams that it's pretty likely that a lot of people are going to play him. And then Sac Bow is honestly kind of bad. It can be fine, right? It has some, I guess, niche use. It's basically useless on Farazan because Farazan's skill has an internal cooldown on particle generation, which means that even if you E charge attack, if you don't have the C1, right, you're only gonna get one set of particles, so it's kind of shit. On Tefneti, it's not really good because you'd rather just focus on his damage. It can be fine, I guess, but it's just not all that great. It is very often Kolei's best weapon, so if you play Nilo teams, it's nice to have. If you play some Aggravate teams, it can be nice to have, but very often I'd just rather play someone like Yao Yao in most of those Aggravate teams. And the main reason that someone might want to go for Kolei is if you end up using her with LG for the buff, because in Aggravate teams, generally, she's just not that great. It's not good on Yelan, because Fav is better. Like, it's fine on Yelan, but Fav is better, and Fav is the only Fav Fav weapon, right? Fav Bow is the only Fav weapon that everyone is guaranteed to get because you get it from doing the Mondstadt story, right? You get one copy of Favonius Warbow from doing the Mondstadt story. Goro, Sac can be okay on him, but generally Fav is still better because he doesn't generate that many particles. But if you don't have a lot of crit rate on him, right? Because very often people like running him on Exiles as his artifact set, so it can be difficult to get a lot of crit rate on him without hurting his ER too much. So if that's the case, Sac can be fine, I guess, but it's just not ideal. It's shit on Sarah. Yeah, it's not good on Yoimiya, not good on Ganyu, not good on Child. It can be good on Diona, but again, very often Fav is just better. The main reason why you might want to use it on Diona is not actually for the additional energy. It's because it can refresh your shield, right? So if you find yourself dying a lot, it can be nice. It's okay-ish on Venti, but not very good. You'd still, if you care about the energy generation, you'd rather run Fav. I mean, I skipped over Alloy. It can be fine if you actually use Alloy. It can be a good weapon if you use Alloy as like a battery, because you can generate 10 cryo particles in a pretty short amount of time, but like, it's Alloy. Be for real. It's not good on Fischl because she doesn't need it to get basically 100% uptime on Oz anyways, and it's not good on Ember because good one. Anyways, all of this to say, like, it has some use, but generally, if you already have a Fav, it doesn't do that much, and the characters that do care about it generally don't care about the refines all that much, with the only real exception being Cole if you play her in Nilo teams. But yeah, so that basically covers all of the weapons. All in all, this is a significantly below average banner for the 5 stars, about average for the 4 stars. If this was the 4-star lineup with actual good 5-star weapons, I'd say that you're like kind of happy with that. They're not weapons that you really care about getting, but they're not weapons that like you'd be too disappointed with. The character banner, I'd say that overall it is slightly below average, right? You have Fischl, which is good, and the other two that are generally not really something that you'd want. I know, again, that there's a lot of people that sim for Kaveh, so I know that there might be a lot of people that end up pulling on either of these two banners literally just because they want to get Kaveh. That's what I'm gonna do. If that's the case for you, generally Baizhu will probably be more universally useful, but he's also not really necessary anywhere, and Ganyu does have the upside of basically being the best cryo unit for hyperfridge teams and being very comfortable as like an overworld unit. If you want to have like the monotone daily grind be a little bit less annoying, Ganyu can be fine. So if you don't really care about either of the 5 stars, and you're just considering going on the banner for Kaveh, from a general meta perspective, the Baizhu one would be a little bit better. From I want to get a team that I can be lazy in the overworld with, the Ganyu one would be better. Also, if you already have Ganyu and you want to get Kaveh, right, and your question is, should I go for Baizhu or for C1 Ganyu? If you actually do play your Ganyu, her C1 is like somewhat minor, but not like useless. Right, it makes it so that after you get a fully charged, like level 2 charge shot, when it hits the opponent, it reduces their cryo res, which is good. It also generates 2 energy, and like overall, it's fine. Like it's nice. It's a little bit more damage. It often matters more if you're playing one of the more like lazy versions of Ganyu teams, right? The ones that don't actually do VV setups, right? If you're just playing like Bennett, Zhongli, Xiangling, for example, you don't have as much res shred, which means that the cryo res shred matters a little bit more. Like all in all, this is a nice little increase that doesn't do that much, but that isn't useless either. If you already have the C1 and you're asking yourself the same question, this constellation sucks. C2's main use is that it makes it so that if you actually make it to C6, then you can get 2 insta shots instead of 1, right? Like that's the main thing that C2 does. If you're not at C6, the C2 is kind of just not very good. And if you are going for Kaveh and you get an early Baizhu before you get Kaveh, right? And then the question becomes, should I keep sticking to Baiju's banner or swap to Ganyu's banner? I probably would swap. I think his C1 is not particularly good. Right, like the main thing that constellations like this do is they make it easier to get 2 uses of a skill in 1 rotation. So it's the same thing as Elan's C1, where in some teams where you can't really afford to swap back into your character in the middle of your rotation, it basically means that you get 2 uses of the skill instead of 1 per rotation, which significantly increases your energy generation. But if you're playing teams that can actually swap out with without getting punished, right? You're playing, honestly, a lot of the Hyper Bloom teams that play Singto, Yelan, Raiden or Kuki, stuff like that, right? Characters that don't need to stay on the field, and you're swapping out, you can get your E again, like after it's, like when it's back off cooldown. And because it's 10 seconds, you get it once per 10 seconds, so that's twice per 20-second-ish rotation. Getting one additional charge, it doesn't make your cooldown shorter, so you're not gonna get more uses of it per rotation. You will get more uses of it on your first rotation, right? You'll get 3 instead of 2, because you get 2, and then you wait 10 seconds, and then you get another one, right? So that's 3. But every rotation after that, because the cooldown hasn't changed, it's only 2. Generally, these constellations are a nice little quality of life, but they're not that huge of a deal. And because Baizhu doesn't actually have a lot of damage, it matters a lot less on him than it does on someone like Yelan. On Yelan, like in the teams where you wouldn't be able to get a second E, getting her C1 means that you get to run less ER, which means that you get to run more HP or damage or crit. But because Baiju's damage output is kind of not good, then reducing his ER requirements, what do you get instead of ER, right? Like, yeah, you'll get to heal a bit more, but like, do you need that? He's probably going to be healing enough. His E heals a pretty decent amount. Like, you're not really going to need more healing bonus. So you could make him do a little bit more damage by building some EM or building some attack, I guess. But his scalings are not particularly good, so basically, you just don't gain as much from this as you would on a character like Yelan. So, all of this to say, his C1 is not that great, so if you actually are going for Kaveh, and you get Baizhu before you get Kaveh, I would probably consider swapping to the Ganyu banner. I went into a little bit more detail than the last time for this one. In the last one, I also went in more detail than I did before, and I asked you guys what you thought about that. Most people seem to appreciate that I did that, so I decided to try going in a little bit more detail this time and actually talk about like potential ways that constellation breakpoints might compare to each other if you're trying to go for specific stuff. Let me know what you thought about it. Let me know if you thought that was useful. Again, I generally would not recommend going for a banner for a specific 4-star. I'm gonna do it because I'm stupid. It's not a good idea from like a Primogem min-maxing perspective. I can afford to do it because I haven't really wished on anything recently. I have 79,000 Primos saved up, plus 28 Intertwined Fates. I'm not gonna find myself in a situation where I don't have the Primos to go for a character that I want because I'm doing this. But if that's the case for you, just keep in mind, right? If you spend enough Primos that you, like after you've gotten your character, you don't have enough Primos to guarantee a new character, then if the next character is a character that you want to get, you're gonna have to either skip them or spend to get them. So make sure that if that's not a situation you want to find yourself into, you keep enough Primogems that it's not gonna be the case. Anyways, as usual, don't spend money on this shit game. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you appreciated that I went a little bit more in depth than last time. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys around. Wait, shit, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, comment, and go check out the other videos. Alright, I'll see you guys around. Bye.